Health, wellness, and longevity. Osmond de Silva, Tech Citizen Entrepreneurship Academy, London. Section 1, Introduction. Objectives of this course. The main objectives of this course is health, how to be healthy and stay healthy by focusing on prevention, wellness, develop good habits that serve in the long run, longevity, live a long and happy life. Who can benefit from this course? Everyone, people of all ages, genders, and backgrounds. Also the young, the so-called invincible generation in terms of health and wellness, and the so-called elderly, who are the retired generation, who want to rest and retire. Who is Osmond de Silva? Founder and instructor of Tech Citizen Entrepreneurship Academy, mentor to entrepreneurs and startups, extensive industry and professional experience. Why should I listen to him? Over 30 years of experience on the subject, living, breathing, and eating the healthy lifestyle for all these years. Extensive research and study in the health arena. Contact with people from all nationalities, backgrounds, and with excellent health professionals in all areas of health and wellness. Let's look at some definitions. These are my definitions. They are not any standard definitions. So health, living a life without illness, sickness and medication, being in peak condition all year round and all around. Wellness, treating the body and mind as a priority at all times. Looking at the body holistically, as well as the sum of individual parts. Longevity, to live a long life and having all of the above. So it becomes your lifestyle and identity. A disclaimer, this seminar is for educational purposes only. Seek professional advice and guidance whenever required. This is not about treating or curing specific conditions. I'm not a qualified health practitioner. A brief history of time. We need to look back in history before we look to our current situation and looking forward. There are three eras we'll briefly consider. The first one is Paleolithic era. This is the period from 3 million years ago to around 12,000 years going back. And I put that in green. You'll see why I'm using the colors. Green is the right color. Urbanization era, which is amber, period from 12,000 years ago till today, the times we are living in now. And that makes up about 1.1% of our time span, a very, very tiny time span compared to the millions of years humans have been around on the planet. And the future is from now onwards, say the next 30 to 50 years. First, let us look at the population growth, because this will determine the environment we live in, the food we get, the water we drink, the pollution, and so on and so forth. So in the Paleolithic era, which covers several million years ago, the population would have been less than, there's only a prediction, a few million, maybe 10, 20, 30 million around the world. They would have been scattered, just very, very small groups of people scattered around the world. In the last 10,000 years, the population has started to increase to about 50 million which we'll call the farming era, up to say about 1,000 years ago, it was in tens of millions to hundreds of millions. It grew very rapidly. And that is why, one of the reasons why we had to introduce farming methods to feed the growing population. And in the future, say 2000 onwards, could be in the next 30, 40, 50 years, the population is growing in billions. So we expect it to reach around 10 billion population soon in the entire planet. The first one I put in green is Paleolithic. Is the name given to the period which extends from the earliest known use of stone tools by humans around 3.3 million years ago down to roughly 12,000 years ago. The hunter-gatherer generation used simple tools to hunt, from stones, wood, bones. All the food they ate was natural, wild and fresh. These three words, extremely important. We'll call them whole foods. Whenever you hear the word whole foods, that is what they're referring to. There was nothing done to change or alter the substance of these foods. Literally, the human-like creatures would just take the food from the trees and just eat it, or kill some wild animal and just eat it straight away. There was no way to keep a preserved food for long periods of time. They could keep it for a few days, but not longer. Also, they were worried about other animals or other competitive species getting to the food. Fire and heating food could have extended its lifespan. And using fire is really the very slow start of the food processing. They lived a nomadic lifestyle, scattered in small groups around the world, going wherever they could find food and water. The population would have been in few millions, tens of millions. Typical diet, called the Paleolithic diet, was fruit, vegetables, proteins and fats. That's about all they had. The proteins and fats mainly from animals, fish and birds as well. All wild. This from Wikipedia. It's also unlikely that the Paleolithic hunter-gatherers were affected by modern disease of affluence. As the countries get more and more rich, they get this type of disease. Diabetes, type 2, coronary heart disease, and so on and so forth, because they ate mostly lean meats, plants, and frequently engaged in intense physical activity. So they're very active. And because the average lifespan was shorter than the age of common onset of these conditions. Next is the urbanization era, which I'm putting in a sort of amber color, which is, we have to think about this very carefully, this era that we are living in. This is when the current practices of farming started proper. It consists of growing crops and keeping cattle using what I'd call the semi-natural method. So we move from natural, all natural in the Paleolithic era, to semi-natural in this era which we are living in now, and into the future which we'll see in a moment. As the population grew rapidly, people lived in large groups, often closer to each other. They needed a way to feed the population several times a day. Also, they became less dependent on seasons by using storage, rotation of crops, and keeping cattle. So these people, they wanted a bit of certainty with their food and water. That is why they started the farming, to keep quantities of things available whenever they needed it. Initially, it was very labor intensive. However, with growing demand, most of the work is mechanized. This word mechanized here is very important. It's almost getting industrial. So they're taking food and turning it into an industrial process. The transition from hunter-gatherer to settled agricultural societies, called the Neolithic Revolution, first began around 12,000 years ago. Farming originated independently in different parts of the world as hunter-gatherer societies transitioned to food production rather than food capture. Again, we're using factory sort of words like food production, mechanized, processing and stuff like that. You'll hear these words used very often these days. Farming practices. The modern farming practices have led to an increase in the quantity of food to feed the growing population, but at a cost of low nutritional quantity. Some of the practices we have to think about and question is: 1. The use of chemicals and pesticides in farming. 2. Use of hormones and antibiotics in treating livestock. 3. Livestock feed what's fed to the animals being of low quality. For example, giving them corn instead of feeding them on fresh grass. Poor conditions for breeding stock and storage of grains and meats, meaning storing things for very long periods of time and possibly spraying food in order to extend the lifespan of these foods. And also they involve with transportation, storage as well, using refrigerators and the like. Intensive animal farming or industrial livestock production, also known by its opponents as factory farming. This word, again, we are bringing industrialization. We're using the word factory here. Is a type of intensive agriculture, specifically an approach to animal husbandry designed to maximize production while minimizing cost. So in here, they're treating it purely like a business. And in fact, it is a business where they're trying to improve the yield, minimize costs, and hence increase profit. So it's more profit-oriented business. To achieve this, agribusiness keep livestock such as cattle, poultry, and fish at high stocking densities at large scale and using modern machinery, biotechnology, and global trade. The main products of this industry are meat, milk, and eggs for human consumption. There are issues regarding whether intensive animal farming is sustainable or ethical. Wikipedia. Now, the future, a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what direction it's heading. But looking at the past, we might be able to predict a few things. The population, and I put this in red, so this one we have to think very carefully about. The population is expected to reach 10 billion in the coming decades. Could be more, could be less. So the basic necessities like food and water will continue to come under increasing pressure. The next stage is to mass produce food totally in-house, like in a laboratory. It will not be, or there could be some percentage of it that will be farmed outside, but they produce a lot of it in bubbles or indoors in laboratories. The use of GMO foods will increase. So in the future, we'll move to mostly or mainly man-made or artificial methods for producing food. Lifestyle habits or protocols. I prefer to call these habits as these are things that I incorporate into my daily life. So it actually forms part of my identity and lifestyle. All these habits are equally important. Although I might list them in different order, they're all equally important. And these are practical things. So in the seminar, we'll cover theory, which will help you understand things. But there's also practical things that I do and should be implemented. So let's look at the feet. Possibly a very neglected part of the body. Always keep feet dry and clean. This is a big problem area for people with diabetes. Avoid hurting or damaging your feet in any way. Things falling on it, accidentally banging into something when you're walking, or also stamping on something that you've not looked at on the street or in the garden or in a park, for example. Socks and shoes. Make sure to change your socks and shoes regularly. Buy a new pair of shoes on a regular basis. I was reading, there's a nice story about this. I was reading in Quora about a very rich guy, a millionaire, saying he's very frugal with his costs. He has a 15-year-old car. He never, doesn't bother buying a new one. He lives in a very old house. But he mentioned this point, he's been wearing the same shoes for the past 10 years. That immediately rings bells in my ears, because what happens when you wear the same shoes for a very long period of time, several years, and there's no way you can wash or clean them, say for example leather shoes, they can become a hotbed for bacteria and bugs. So always, every few years, buy a new pair of shoes. Avoid wearing hard material for shoes. For example, leather. I do not use any leather shoes at all. Also, things like pointed shoes with high heels for women can be a danger as well. I only wear trainers that are very soft and that I've tried out and taken a lot of time and decision on whether I should buy it and suitable for me. So take your time. If you want, you can see a specialist like a podiatrist, which I mentioned below, and they will help you with that process. Creams. Do not use any creams between the toes as will keep the area moist, which is not good. Use cream for cracked and dry skin, especially in the winter cold. Corns and calluses. These are the hard bits that form on your feet. They are caused by pressure or rubbing the skin on the hands or the feet. Usually it's the feet. Use a file to remove hard skin, but first it's better to soak the feet in warm water to make the hard skin a bit soft. And then you can use a file to scrape it down. Do some research on toenail infection and also ingrown toenails. If the color of your feet or toenails change suddenly for a long period of time, you will need to see a specialist. For example, I've mentioned the action point, make an appointment to see a podiatrist. Air the feet a few hours a day by not wearing socks and using sandals. Usually what happens is people in colder countries, they tend to wear socks and shoes 24/7. Now that is not good in terms of, you want to aim at airing out the feet, giving it a lot of fresh air, and it'll stay dry in that way. I'll show you a picture of the sandals below. Legs, aerobics and resistance training is required. Not one, not the other, but both, which is weight training. Avoid sitting down for long periods of time. Like people sit down for 8 hours in a day. You have to get up every 45 minutes, walk around the room, walk around the office. Keep your feet moving, keep the circulation moving. Walk instead of using a car as much as possible. In some instances, you might need to use a car, but always walk. I do not even own a car. I walk everywhere. Climb hills and obstacles like our ancestors did for centuries. Do not always try to walk on flat roads. Try going through obstacles and hills. Also, in that case, use stairs instead of lifts. The muscles, you have to build your leg muscles because they're carrying a huge amount of weight. So for example, I'm 70 kgs. My legs have to carry my entire weight. The stronger they are, the better it is for you. So you won't develop any bone problems in future. Use specific equipment in the gym or at home for this as well. I've got a home gym. The types of equipment is long list. This is for weight training and muscle building. Leg press, squats, leg extension, curls. Action points, get the legs working all day long. Of course, except when you're sleeping. Get advice and training from a good personal trainer, and it has to be a good one. So you use your time and money efficiently and get results. This is an example of a typical flip-flop people wear in very hot countries like Brazil. Wear it a few hours every day without your socks so that your full feet get aired and stays dry and gets a lot of fresh air all the time. Modern day disease and illness. There is a saying in the financial markets: when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, which really means that whatever happens in America is usually followed by the rest of the world, the trends, the fads, the fashion. And the same with lifestyle diet as well. Usually we find in healthy societies or regions, the elderly people are very healthy because they follow the traditional lifestyle. But what happens is the younger people start following the American lifestyle. They want to move away from their traditional lifestyle. And these young people start getting on weight, putting on diseases, getting ill, stuff like that. So everyone sooner or later will follow the American lifestyle. And the data I've chosen here and the graphs I've chosen here is based on America because everyone else is going to follow the trend. If we have an understanding of this topic, then we will know what to do and what to avoid. The best way to deal with this is to manage things that are in our control. There are many aspects that are out of our control, and the best we can do here is to minimize the risks. The main emphasis of the lecture is on prevention and doing it as early as possible. In fact, the whole seminar is based on prevention and doing things as early as possible. So you're being very highly proactive. The disease and illness on the graphs are increasing at a rapid rate and are very complicated. It's nothing simple about them. There is a limited understanding of many of these problems at this point in time. So I'll show you a graph in a minute of 2019 American stats. Pre-COVID data was selected in order to avoid distortions caused by the pandemic. There are many other diseases that are not shown on this graph but must be considered. And there's a very, very long list of them. Osteoporosis, rheumatoid arthritis, dementia, multiple sclerosis. The highest rate of cancer comes from lung cancer for both men and women. Breast cancer is the second deadliest cancer for women, while prostate cancer is the second deadliest cancer for men. Smoking, tobacco, physical inactivity, poor diet, stress, and being overweight or obese are all risk factors for developing heart cancer. In fact, these 4 factors, and you can add in getting good night's sleep as well, they are actually involved in a lot of the health problems that we see today. And you can imagine a lot of people, say about 50 or even 100 years ago, did not have these 4 or 5 problems. They were very active 100 years ago. They had a reasonable diet, reasonably good diet, very low levels of stress, not being overweight or obese, and hopefully they had good night's sleep in those days. So let's look at the graph. This is the graph for 2019 per 100,000 of population. In 2019, the American population was 330 million. So if you want the exact numbers here, what you have to do is you have to multiply each of these numbers on the graph by 3.3. So for example, heart disease, if you multiply 161 by 3.3, you get 531,000. That's slightly over 500,000. And if you take cancer, the 146.2, and you multiply it by 3.3, you get 481,000. So just heart disease and cancer in total would have caused death to 1 million people in that year. 1 million people, just those 2, out of the 330,000 million population. Cancer is caused by smoking, quite considerable issue that's still ongoing. Also, there's issues of sun and skin cancer as well. These are accidents and injuries. Could be in the home, could be at work, could be on the road. Respiratory diseases, this is becoming very important now because COVID was associated with lungs and problems of the lung. Stroke is when there's insufficient blood flow to the brain. And if you look at these three, stroke, Alzheimer's, and also the one I mentioned, dementia, they're all to do with the brain. They start at the brain. Of course, they move to other parts of the body, but the brain is where these things start to originate. Diabetes is very, very complicated. It's to do with sugar, carbs, insulin hormone, and a lot of these diseases are related and interrelated. So for example, if you have diabetes, it can also lead to stroke and also lead to heart disease as well. By the way, heart disease is a lot to do with the blood flow in your body and how your heart functions as well. Kidney disease, problems with too much drinking alcohol. And these to a less extent, influenza and pneumonia and intentional self-harm. These tend to be the smaller ones. If we now go back 100 years, we get some interesting data. So this is 2019 was what was shown on the graph above. And this was about 100 years ago. We can see that heart disease has increased significantly and cancer has gone up by 2.3 times. These two are still the big causes for death in America, heart disease and cancer. Let's look at the bottom of this chart. Very interesting. There's a large increase in respiratory or lung diseases and large increase in brain related diseases, which is stroke, Alzheimer's. Also remember, stress plays a large part in these diseases as well because it affects the brain, the mindset, and in the end the body. And interestingly, diabetes and kidney disease were not that high several years ago, so they're not actually shown on this graph. So diabetes and kidney have increased significantly in the past 100 years. Lifestyle habits and protocols regarding sleep and rest. These are habits I incorporate into my life, so it is part of my identity and lifestyle. Note, all the habits are equally important. I will keep a Word document for each of these habits in the resource section of each lecture. It will be a Word document because I'll be adding and changing things as we go along. So it will not be in PDF form. Also, I would advise that you save a copy on your computer so you have it at all times and can refer to it. Sleep. Aim to get 8 hours of sleep every night. Sleep and wake up at the same time each day. I sleep at 10 p.m. and get up at 6 a.m. The body's metabolism and blood circulation slows down at night. Pre-bedtime diet. My last meal is at 6 p.m. So I do not eat or drink anything significant from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's like a fast of 12 hours, but I would eat just a very tiny snack in between. So I don't eat much at all or drink anything at that time. However, I may nibble on a few snacks just before bedtime, maybe just an apple or half an apple. Getting up at night. I get up once or twice at night to go to the toilet. I do not drink water or liquids after 6 p.m. What I find is if I start drinking too much liquids after 6 p.m., then I tend to get up several times a night, maybe 3-4 times a night, which I don't want to. So I make sure I'm very well hydrated during the daytime from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 12 hours. Make sure to have the lights on to see clearly at night time when you get up to go to the toilet. So you don't want to get an accident or dash into anything. However, if you get up several times, then do seek advice. Because if you get up several times, then your sleep is being interrupted too many times. It's not good. Do walk in the bedroom and move around at night time when you get up to go to the toilet. This encourages blood circulation because you don't want to be sleeping flat in one position for 8 hours. Again, this comes back to the, us being sedentary and not moving. We need to be moving around. So we encourage blood circulation. Clothing. All clothing, for a good example, is your socks. It must not be tight in order to have good blood circulation. Gadgets, keep all gadgets, mobile computers, they all should be switched off and kept as far away from you as possible. Electric blanket, in the winter only. I use 2 electric blankets and it has to be on very low settings because I don't want to overheat at night. One is the undercover which goes below me and overcovers the one that goes above me. However, some people like to use hot water bottles in the winter. Make sure it's secured properly. Aloe vera juice. I drink a few tablespoons of organic aloe vera juice just before bedtime, and I've been doing this for like decades, for years and years and years. This clears and soothes the stomach and the digestive tract. Some people will add water and honey to mask the taste. This is a very good idea because remember, I'm not eating anything for 12 hours. So what happens when I take even these few tablespoons of aloe vera every single night, it actually gets to work and clears all the toxins, clears the digestive tract, soothes any aches and pains you might have in the stomach area. And you feel very relaxed at night and in the morning. Dental hygiene. Dental care is an important component of my sleep routine. I make sure my teeth are cleaned thoroughly. This is the important one, cleaned thoroughly before bedtime. This will be covered in detail in the dental hygiene protocol lecture. There's a lot to be discussed in dental hygiene. And again, this is a very big area which people tend to ignore, do very quickly, tend to rush. And I will go into more detail in that later. So this is the one I like the best. I've tried many different types of aloe vera. Make sure it's organic, but a lot of the aloe vera is quite good. Also, you don't want too many added preservatives or chemicals in it, right? GMO free as well. In the past, I have been actually getting very large aloe vera leaves and trying to cut it and do it all myself, but it can become a bit messy. I prefer this method. It's much more convenient. Finally, rest. I do believe in work-life balance, i.e. work, rest and play. This topic will be discussed in more detail later, but I make sure that I get a lot of rest in between my work routines. And also I make sure that the rest I get is by going outdoors. So for example, I go to the gym, I go for a walk, I go for a coffee. It's all outdoors. I tend to visit other people. I tend not to, I don't drive a car, so I walk everywhere. So make sure you get a good balance of work, rest and play in your routine. Big money makers. This is about all the people who are involved in our life, who actually make big money. Also, I will look at the ones who make little money as well. So all the data shows that the money flows into the sickness industry. And when we're talking about sickness industry, I'm talking of people getting sick, staying sick. And now the new problem is people getting sick and ill at a younger age, even kids and children. Could be 5 years, could be 10 years. So no one is excluded from sickness and illness now. This was in 2018. Bernie Sanders was talking about corruption and greed in the USA pharmaceuticals industry. It is a very big, very complex discussion about where the money goes, where the money is being spent, because it is the citizens' money and we want to make sure it's spent correctly. I've put together this table. On the left-hand side is what I would describe as the big money makers. We are talking of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. These people make money. On the right-hand side is the small money makers, people who make very little money, if at all. So let's look at the big money makers. Of course, all the doctors and the hospitals, this includes private hospitals, government hospitals, doctors, consultants, and nurses. The pharmaceuticals companies that make the drugs and the pharmacies, as well as every single chemical you can think of, all the chemical industries, which includes chemicals in the homes, chemicals that are used heavily on farms, on animals, and also chemicals that are used in industry as well. The major supermarket chains, and what's within the supermarkets is all the prepackaged, plastic packaged, the bad food and the drinks that are within all the supermarket chains. All the restaurants, takeaways, and chefs, unfortunately, these so-called celebrity chefs, they are more interested in selling things, selling their books, selling their merchandise. They are not up to date with the recent health trends that will help people to improve their health. They still use practices and techniques that are decades, 10, 20, 30 years old. They do not want to change and keep up to date with the times. Also, of course, restaurants like to keep the costs low, trying to make a profit, so they'll use very cheap ingredients. They try and cut cost. And these ingredients and foods that you get from restaurants will not be in the best interest of the customer's health and wellness. That's why I recommend, even if you go to the top restaurants, to go occasionally, not on a regular basis. The advertising and marketing industry is heavily paid by all the above industries. So, of course, they will promote all the bad food, the bad drinks, the bad lifestyle, and that is passed to TV and radio advertising. So all of them make good money out of this as well. The government has also got a big hand in this at the local and the national level. They, in a way, say they're trying to help the public. I have my questions on that. And then, of course, you have all the lobby groups that are associated with all the above, with huge budgets that will lobby the government to continue doing what they're doing and maintain the status quo. You also have social media and cars. We know how destructive they are. And the list goes on and on. We can add a lot to that list. As you can see, the left-hand side is all about making big money. And I think the health, wellness of the individual public and citizens is on the back burner. It's not the priority. Let's look at these small money makers, which I use a lot of. Things like dietitians, a lot of alternative practitioners. Of course, the organic food industry is very small. The health food and independent shops, they're very small, do not have huge budgets. Yoga and Pilates studios, a lot of them barely survive. They do not make much money. Personal trainers have it tough as well. And also things like mental health, again, a lot of shows made about it, but not much money is given to the mental health industry. Again, they do not see it as being a money-making thing, so not much money is given in that area. Well, then you will ask the question, who can we trust with our health? If so much money is being spent on the left and very little on the right, what we know is that very little is spent on prevention of disease and illness. The way I think of it is the only person, the absolute only person I can trust with my health and wellness is one person, that is myself. So how do I go about it? I do research and study based on first principles. Every action I take regarding health and wellness, every food I eat, everything I do, breathe, sleep and think about is based on first principles. You must have heard of the first principles in school or college, that you start right from the beginning, ignore what everyone else is saying and doing. Say I would take a fruit, say for example I have apple, and do absolute every bit of research I can, irrespective of whatever else I know from the past. Always start from ground zero and then build up my knowledge, skills, experience on that. And then if I decide to incorporate in my diet and lifestyle, I would do it. Otherwise, I might reject it. So part of that process is I try and test things out for myself a lot. And it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience. So as a result, I'm constantly seeking to improve my lifestyle and choices. I have mentioned this before. Every day, I'm constantly seeking to improve my lifestyle and choice. It's not something I do once a month or once a year or once a week. It's every day I'm trying to incorporate new things into my lifestyle and change and improve it. Home test equipment. I'm regularly testing myself using equipment both in the home and outside the home. So I would take a private test, private blood test. Sometimes are private companies, sometimes provided by the health service. I'm also thinking in future of doing an MRI scan as well. So these are on my mind constantly. You can use these home tests on family and friends as well. I would recommend having at least these 3 pieces of equipment that can be easily obtained from a chemist or from online. But make sure you get good brands. You want it to be accurate and to last a long time. For the weight scale, obesity is a big problem and an ever-growing one as well. Largely it is a result of people eating the wrong foods and drinks, drinking the wrong drinks, having big portion sizes, eating too often, and on top of all of that, a lack of activity and exercise. This can lead to diabetes and other medical complications. You should measure your weight regularly. I measure mine once a month. Have a plan to manage being overweight. So I have a target weight that I know I have to always aim for around 70 kgs. If I, for any occasion, for example, Christmas time, in the new year, if I overeat and stuff like that, I know that if it goes anyway a few kgs above that, I have a plan to bring my weight back down again and how to manage that. However, all plans must be sustainable, so avoid all these yo-yo dieting fads that you see around the place. Also, I would say that you look into the BMI, which is the body mass index, which you can use with this. It's not perfect, but it works fine for most people. So for your particular height, you can see the weight range you have to be in, and it will tell you if for your height you're exceeding your weight range. So definitely look and research into the body mass index, BMI. Also note, you have to put the weight scales on a very hard surface, not the carpet, before using it. And measure yourself at least 3 times to get an accurate reading. Usually I find when I do it the first and second time, it might not be accurate, but by the time I do the 3rd time, it does give an accurate reading. Blood pressure. Check your blood pressure regularly. It must be taken at the same time every day, say for a full week. So you take it 7 times every day in a week, but it must be at the same time. Again, you'll have to do this again. Measure yourself at least 3 times to get an accurate reading. You'll find the first one tends not to be very accurate, but by the time you do the 2nd and 3rd time, you will need a bit of practice in order to get an accurate reading. So you have to ensure that the tube is based along your palm, and the actual wrap is placed above your arm properly. So you can watch a lot of videos and get some practice in doing it. Then you'll get an accurate result. A good monitor, very, very popular, very well known, reliable one is Omron, which I use. Blood sugar. There is a problem with sugar addiction. People are not aware of the massive extent and depth of this problem that is evident. I see parents feeding their young children with sweets and sugar drinks everywhere and all the time. This can result in them growing up with a sugar addiction. Also, people do not understand the problem of eating lots and lots of carbs, which turns into sugar. There could be millions of people with pre-diabetes, but they are totally unaware of diabetes or what pre-diabetes means. They could be in this stage for a decade, for 10 years, before the symptoms actually show up or before the symptoms become known. This is why you have to test as soon as possible and as early as possible. Good time to take this test is when you get up before breakfast, and the other time is, say, about 3 hours after meal. A lot of people recommend 2 hours after meal, which is postprandial. It's called a postprandial test. But I think 3 hours is better after a meal. So what will happen when you have a meal? Your blood sugar is going to spike and be very high. But then slowly after 2 or 3 hours, it goes down, and you want to see what the blood sugar is when it's on the downward, going down. I use this one, Sinocare, readily available, to test your blood sugar. Very easy to do, very accurate as well. Fasting, fact or fad? The concept of fasting has come into fashion from our paleo ancestors. For millions of years, our ancestors were always in feast or famine mode. Whenever they had food, they would eat it with their family, and they could go hours, days, weeks without food or with very little food as well, just depending on where they lived, on what the environment was, what the climate was, and many other factors. So this was just the norm for them. And of course, they did this because there was not much choice at the time, depending on where they lived and so on and so forth. The act of fasting has been around for centuries, especially in all the main religions. Here the motivation is religion. It's not about losing weight or anything like that, or getting healthy. It's purely about religion. And that's the other reason why the Muslims are able to do this sort of thing. Let's look at the foundations. It's important to focus on eating the right foods and not overeating. That is the most important thing here. Thinking about fasting and so on can come later, but these two important points are very, very key here. This is achievable for most people with a bit of practice. And also there's no need to be too hard or harsh. I meant harsh on yourself. So recommendations, for most people, I do not recommend a very intense fast, as it is not sustainable. Also, the other issue is that a lot of the times I see can be done incorrectly, and things can go severely wrong if you're not careful. So two things I see people doing is they do it too often. They do it several times a week, several times a month, when really you should be just doing this like once a month. Also, they tend to do it for very long hours, like over 12 hours. Once you do it much longer than 12 hours, there can be dangers associated, and you have to be very careful with that. So how do I do it? As I mentioned earlier, that I do not eat or drink from 6 p.m. in the evening to 6 a.m. in the morning. That's 12 hours. However, I might eat a very small snack, like a fruit, just before bedtime. But I do not drink any water from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. because I do not want to get up regularly during the night time to go to the toilet. Still, I do get up, even with this protocol, I do get up once or twice to go to the toilet. Now, what I'm showing here, you don't just do this overnight. It takes time, patience, and practice. And I've been doing it for a very long time. So the way I do it, I would eat a very, very small breakfast when I get up around 6 a.m. And I would eat small snacks, some nuts and stuff throughout the day. But at 12 p.m. during the lunch break, I would have a coffee, second coffee, and a bit of snacks like tofu, hummus, 3 or 4 snacks on a plate. Then at 4 p.m., this is the only meal I eat. It's not a very large meal, but it just the only meal I eat. And after that, there's no food and water, except for a small snack before bedtime. The point I'm trying to make here is the quality of food is more important than the quantity. So always focus on getting top quality food into your system. And all these snacks and meals and food and water, they're all very, very high quality. Everything I get into my body is very high quality. The aim is to keep the weight under control without having to go on yo-yo diets. Again, I see many people going on many diets throughout the year. Some people are going on 2-3 different diets, so they're trying things out. This, I think, is not sustainable. And in fact, it might actually do more harm to you physically and mentally if you're just going on and off these various things. I'm looking for things that are very sustainable in the long term, and it just becomes part of your habit and routine. You don't have to think about it. Also, each large meal will increase your insulin. This is a very important term here, insulin. Insulin is the main fat storage hormone in your body. Whenever you eat a large meal, the insulin level goes up, and of course it goes down 2 or 3 hours after the meal. So check this regularly after meals with glucose monitor, which I've given as test equipment that you should buy. Detox and elimination. The body is subjected to a barrage of items, both good and bad, every hour of the day. It knows what to do with the good items, as it has been doing this for millions of years. When our paleo ancestors were living a very natural, normal life for millions of years, they did not need any special detoxification or elimination protocols, anything like that, because they were eating, breathing, living all things that were good for them. However, our modern diets and lifestyle have presented the body with challenges. This comes in many different forms that the body may not know how to manage. Medication, chemicals, pesticides, industrial chemicals, pollution in the air and the water we drink, radiation which is not visible, from our telephones, from the microwave ovens, from the television, indoor, where you're staying in, people are staying indoors in the house or in cars a lot of the time. They use a lot of chemicals on their body, on the face, on the soap, using soaps, using aftershave, body odor sprays, house chemicals, cleaning chemicals to clean the house, sprays. These chemicals tend to, even if you open the windows, open the doors, they tend to stay in and around the house, possibly on the walls, on the carpets, in the air for very long periods of time, and you end up breathing them because they move from room to room. Poor diet, sugar, processed food, preservatives, GMO, and toxins, metals, plastics. The other important point to remember is that if you're, like most people, living a sedentary lifestyle, you have to move around for your blood to circulate in the body. If you're staying in a fixed position for hours and hours, 15 hours a day, sitting on a chair, it makes the process of elimination more difficult for your body, right? Because elimination requires movement, requires transportation. How does the body respond? In the above case, the body will not recognize the items. Also, it may see them as being harmful, so it seeks ways to eliminate the items. It is best to minimize contact or avoid the items completely. Elimination. The body will eliminate items through organs. That's the main way it does it. The function of the organs, the colon, the importance of microbiome and immune system. This topic of microbiome immunity is becoming more and more and more important now. You'll see this everywhere. How to have a very good bacteria in your gut. Kidneys and livers, urine elimination, liquids elimination. The lung is for the gases and the air, which is CO2, which is, we breathe in oxygen, eliminate CO2. And the skin also, as you know, this is the largest organ in your body. It will eliminate salt, water, and any other waste as well. All body organs must be maintained in top condition and at all times. So you have to do everything you can to keep each of your organs individually and collectively in absolute good condition. Also note that harmful substances in your body can damage your organs, which will also bring another layer of problems. Detox. Make sure you do regular detoxing to keep the body clean and healthy. Lifestyle habits or protocols. The ones here to do with skin, hair, nails. This tends to be very near and dear to most people, because whenever you come in contact with someone else, the first thing is they look at is your face and your hair. Also, everyone is trying to look good. There's a lot of money in this cosmetic fashion industry. So let's look at the skin. The skin should look fresh and alive. This will only occur when you're leading a healthy lifestyle with healthy diet as part of your program. In Chinese and Indian medicine, your health can be determined just by looking at your face. The doctor can tell how healthy you are, the practitioners, purely by looking at your face, looking at your eyes, looking at your tongue. Glowing skin. It is rare to see people with glowing and radiant skin. And that's how your skin should be, and it's possible to be that way. However, people have skin that is usually pale and very unhealthy. People should have great skin even at an older age. Now, this is what I tend to disagree with. Most people think that as you get older, your face has to become droopy and a bad condition. I think that that's not true. There are people in the 80s and 90s I know that have very good skin. So the older you get, you should still be able to have good skin and good teeth and good health. Things to avoid. Do not touch or scratch your face with your hands. Do not touch any boils, pimples, etc. on your face especially, and even on your skin. Do not put chemicals on your face. This includes deodorants, aftershave makeup, soap, sprays. I just tend to wash my face with water. I do not use any soaps on my face at all, or any chemical sprays, etc. Use a separate towel for your face and body. And excessive exposure to sunlight should be avoided on the face. A lot of people are thinking of cosmetic surgery and Botox and other treatments. Remember that prevention is always better than cure, and is the key for delaying the appearance of visible signs of aging. Cosmetic surgery can be expensive, ongoing, and the biggest problem on top of all of that is that it doesn't look natural after you've had it. So on the right hand side, I think your face can look like that and should look like that when you're young, when you're middle aged, as you get old as well. However, I'm seeing a lot of people who have the face on the left hand side, and it's getting younger. I'm seeing younger and younger people. I won't mention the specific ages, but younger and younger people who are looking like this on the left hand side. They're getting a lot of forehead lines. The collagen in the face is drooping. They get sagging faces, and not easy to get rid of now and to sort out with cosmetic surgery. Of course, people are trying to sell you a lot of stuff like expensive cosmetic treatments, Botox and stuff, but it does not look natural. So always try the prevention route. Hair. Your hair should look glossy. Cover it up with a hat or cap in cold and hot temperatures. Try and wash it as well regularly. I tend to wash my hair twice a week only. Excessive washing is not very good. Things to avoid: do not touch your head with your hands, or your hair with your hands. Of course, even also if you have boils and pimples or different markings on your hair or head, do not touch them or do not scratch them. Do not put chemicals on your hair, which include soap, shampoos, sprays, dyes. If you're going for shampoos, always use organic ones that have no chemicals in it. Avoid using hair dryers because the heat of it will damage your hair. Just let it dry naturally. Nails should be a light pink color. Wear gloves in cold and hot temperatures, again to protect your hands. Make sure nails are cut regularly and correctly. Toenails are covered in the section on feet. Blue zones of health. There are many things we can learn